It's hard to express in words the highest regard that all Jews, no matter their location, had for the Torah and for Moses. So to say that something or someone could do more than the Torah or Moses could do, well, those are fighting words. So what does Paul mean by this? See, there are many laws and commandments listed in the Torah. Judaism says there's 613 of them. For each law, there is a prescribed remedy, should that law be broken. For simple theft, for example, the stolen goods had to be returned along with a 20% penalty. And the thief was then required to go to the temple, offer an animal sacrifice in addition. If the perpetrator had a contrite heart, and if he did these things, he was forgiven for his sin. It was like that for almost all the Torah laws, but not for every law. For some laws, the crime was considered by God as to be so grave that the only remedy was the perpetrator's life had to be forfeited. That is, no amount of compensation to a victim, no altar sacrifice for atonement could be performed. Forgiveness was impossible. And among the sins for which the law of Moses offered no means of atonement were things such as murder and adultery. The Bible also says that high-handed sins cannot be atoned for. That is, these are the worst of the worst sins. And they are those sins that are committed with an intentional, rebellious, heinous, blasphemous intent. So a sin that might otherwise have had a means of atonement, let's say for manslaughter, might be elevated to murder if it was committed in a high-handed way. Therefore, no means of atonement was available. Paul says that even high-handed sins that could not be atoned for in the Torah by an altar sacrifice could be atoned for by trust in Messiah Yeshua. Boy, there's some good news. This passage is more controversial than it might seem. The rather standard mainstream, it's not universal, but it's pretty standard, mainstream Christian take on this passage is that it means that the Torah of Moses could in no way justify a sinner. That is, these Bible interpreters make justification the point instead of atonement. As usual, this is because those particular interpreters choose to begin with a man-made doctrine and then work backwards from it to try and validate it. The doctrine in this case is, in a nutshell, there is no real forgiveness available in the Torah, ever. Forgiveness is only in Jesus Christ. That doctrine is contradictory to the plain teachings of the Torah. So the doctrine's purpose is only to demean the Torah as worthless, faulty from its inception, and now thankfully dead and gone. This passage in Acts 13:39, at least to me, is plainly worded. And in investigating the Greek, where the key word is dikeu, the plain meaning of that word is righteous, not justify. It speaks of Yeshua being able to make righteous a person who committed crimes, who broke the Torah law, for which there was no remedy for it in the Torah. It in no way implies that every Torah law broken had no remedy to bring that person back to a righteous condition by being forgiven. But that is what many interpreters say this passage means. If that is true, then we have a real quandary on our hands, because we get dozens and dozens of statements like this example in the Torah concerning when a person sins, breaks a Torah law, and then performs the prescribed sacrifice of atonement. Don't turn there, just listen to this. Leviticus chapter 4, 32 to 35. If he brings a lamb as his sin offering, he is to bring a female without defect. Lay his hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it as a sin offering in the place where they slaughter burnt offerings. The Cohen, the priest, is to take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar for burnt offerings. All its remaining blood he's to pour out around the base of the altar. All of its fat he's to remove, as the fat of the lamb is removed from the sacrifice for peace offerings. And the priest is to make it go up in smoke on the altar on top of the offerings for Adonai made by fire. Thus the priest will make atonement for him in regard to the sin he committed, and he will be forgiven. Over and over, more times than I can count. This is the standard formula in the Torah for explaining the procedure for when a person sins. Just kind of changes up on what the offering itself is. And the result, if performed sincerely and properly, is always forgiveness. Always. So real forgiveness occurred under the Levitical sacrificial system. Therefore, it cannot be that the law never actually gave forgiveness and restored righteousness. What we see, however, is that in the law of Moses, God grades sins based on their seriousness. The greater the sin, the more costly the sacrifice. From a cheap dove or a pigeon for a minor sin, all the way up in steps to the most expensive, a mature adult bull for a major sin. What this shows us is, despite the standard Christian bumper sticker doctrine that a sin is a sin is a sin, that stealing a candy bar is no worse to God than murdering your neighbor because they're both sins, is simply false on every level.